Good afternoon, good morning, could be good evening. I'm Greg Fairchild of the University of Virginia, and I am here today to enjoy and engage this conversation with three leaders about the question of how business can solve questions of reentry. And by reentry, we mean what we call returning citizens, those individuals that have spent some time dealing with challenges that they may have had earlier in life, but are now preparing and are indeed released. My conversants today are going to be folks that come from a broad range of both industries and backgrounds. So Genevieve is going to be talking about Dave's Killer Bread. You should look at all of these folks' bios. That would be helpful to you. I won't give you all of them, but Genevieve Martin is from Dave's Killer Bread. She created the Dave's Killer Bread Foundation. She's going to talk a little bit about that company. And if you don't know already about their product, I hope you will learn about it soon. Heather Higginbottom is going to be talking about the work she does at the JP Morgan Chase Policy Center. And again, it's a banking organization, and so they also play a big role in this type of work. Some of you may have seen Steve Preston before on television. He's held some cabinet level positions, and he's going to be talking about the work he does now as CEO of Goodwill Industries. And how, again, that question of how we manage and deal with populations that are especially challenged. That's both the work of Goodwill Industries and, in fact, many of the people who work there. So looking forward to this conversation with the four of us. And we're also looking forward for any questions that you might have that might be raised by the conversation we engage in. If it's okay with you, I'm going to get us started. So I'd like to start with you, Heather. And, you know, I'm a JP Morgan Chase shareholder. And I've got to imagine that if I were walking down Broadway in New York and I'm checking my stock price, I'm seeing how exactly the market is trending and JP Morgan Chase is trending. And then I learned that the bank is doing stuff on reentry. Why should I, as a shareholder, care about that work? And how do I see it play out in the rises and falls of the bank's share price?
Well, thank you, Greg. I'm so grateful for your moderating this panel. You know, we really came to this issue of returning citizens and second chance hiring through the work that we do in communities and as an employer. When you experience the fact that 1 in 3 Americans has some form of a criminal record, and you start to understand just the barrier to employment that record, mere existence of that record can play. We saw that through the work we were doing as an employer, through the work we were doing philanthropically in communities, and said, we want to play a role in addressing the barriers and really challenging the system. And so as an employer, we had a couple of years ago banned the box on an initial employment application and hiring. And our HR professionals were saying, that's good, but if we wanted to do more or go further, how would we do that? How would we take it further? And they began doing some work. Our partners in the foundation said, these are issues that are cross-cutting. The issues around criminal justice reform and hiring and employment are cross-cutting in our work. We see it all the time. And we're funding different projects, but if we really want to make impact at scale, we need to not only hire people with criminal backgrounds and figure out how to do that better, but we also need to be part of the discussion, the public policy discussion. How do we change these rules, and how do we understand how they came to be? And so as a shareholder, one would hope that you would look at this commitment to hiring and understand our commitment here is really about strengthening communities. When people have a job, they can help out themselves, their families, their communities. They are less likely to return to prison if they had been in prison. And while we're a big bank and we are heavily regulated in whom we can hire, we knew there were a lot of people who weren't even applying to JP Morgan Chase who could work here. And we wanted to go deep in some communities and find those people, learn how to introduce them to the opportunities, help with community organizations, partner to help them navigate the process, and then figure out how we could take that model to scale in other cities and communities. So one would hope you'd say, we're coming at this because we believe it really does empower communities, and that makes us all stronger.
So Heather, let me just follow that quickly with was that always an easy conversation? Or was this at first for some people, what? Wait, what?
Yeah, for many members of our team, including at the top of our organization with our CEO, this made a lot of sense because when you lay out the facts and you start to string them together, you say, yeah, we can play a role here. We have a big platform and a voice. We're a big employer. There were some people who might have scratched their head and said, why are we doing this? And when we launched this effort just over a year ago, I have to say I wasn't sure how it would be received externally or internally. And I'm really heartened by the response that we've received. There's always some naysayers, but overwhelmingly, this work has been embraced. And we find people almost every day within our organization who reach out and say, what can I do? And sometimes it's something they can do within our firm. And sometimes it's working externally with other partners, donating resources, volunteering, educating, being someone who can speak about these issues and why it's really important to be committed to them. So we're really encouraged. And actually, 1 year in, we're looking at expanding and building on this work. And, I think that's important to note, especially given COVID, because we've certainly encountered a lot of questions along the way from people who say, oh, you started this when the unemployment rate was very low and when people were really looking to diversify their hiring pools. But now what? And our answer to that is COVID has disproportionately impacted communities of color. And our commitment, because the criminal justice system disproportionately impacts communities of color, our commitment is even that much more important today because communities of color are consistently left behind. Even as America recovers from recessions, they're left further behind. And so we're even more invigorated to take on this work than maybe we even were a year ago.
That's marvelous. Genevieve, you're in a company that you make bread. And I got two thoughts for you. First of all, the name. Now, I know a little bit about this story, but it's got this guy, Dave, and it's killer bread. Could be slang. I'm not sure. Love for people to hear a little bit about the bread, the product, because I'm encouraging people to try it who haven't. But you created, if I have it right, the foundation. And could you say a little bit about how your company thinks about who you hire and then what else you do beyond hiring to assist?
Absolutely. So Dave's Killer Bread is the #1 selling sliced organic bread across the country, and we're distributed across Canada. At any given time, about 40% of our workforce have felony convictions in their past. Dave is a real person. He did not kill anyone. Killer is really in reference to how awesome the product is. It's just really, really good. That was something we'd been advised a number of years ago not to move into that language by marketing. And we said, we're going to do it anyways. And it worked. It's very memorable. The logo is very memorable and the product is fantastic. We've been in that sales position since May of 2014 and haven't budged. So that's exciting. What that's meant, though, is that Dave's Killer Bread, the brand, was born out of a family bakery that started in the 50s. And the impetus around hiring people had always been the same. And that is, if you can do the job, you get the job. It didn't matter if perhaps you had a disability, you were a veteran, a single parent, somebody who'd been formerly incarcerated. If you could do the job, it was yours. But we've been doing it very accidentally and without any intention up until about 2009, 2010, when we were growing 40% year over year. So we looked at our top performers and said, we need to hire more bodies, sometimes overnight, because we have a product to produce, package, and distribute within the next 48 hours. And so we looked at our top performers and said, what are common characteristics, attributes, experiences that make these folks rock stars, and how do we get more of them quickly? And in most cases, not in every case, but in most cases, these individuals have been formerly incarcerated. We said, great, let's lean into it. Let's build relationships with community-based organizations here in our community that specifically serve the returning citizen population, and let's build a recruiting pipeline. We made a lot of mistakes. We had a lot of successes. And as we became more successful, we realized this isn't something that corporate America knew how to do well. They certainly weren't talking about it, and it certainly wasn't something they were proud of if they did do it. And so we saw this opportunity to help educate and inform companies how to do this well, how to leapfrog the mistakes that we had made, and really to do this with confidence, because it's all about hiring the best person for the job. And often that person comes with a criminal background.
So, yeah, I am. So said differently, you guys not only fish, you teach people how to fish. And that's a part of the way you expand and grow the market. You know, Steve, you've obviously had a storied career at the highest levels of the government. You've been involved in leadership on for-profit firms, in waste management, even in investments. But, you know, now you're running a company called Goodwill. And I can imagine, talk about branding, one wouldn't be surprised that a company called Goodwill would be doing good things. But I'm curious about this. Given who you are, I'd love to hear how many thousands of employers, how many thousands of people you reach in a year, because I suspect the number is large. What is it that people who have been formerly incarcerated, who are returning citizens, what is it that other employers don't get that Goodwill does get?
Well, I think, first of all, this is our mission. Our mission is to help people eliminate barriers and reach their full potential through learning and employment. We've been doing it for over 120 years when our founder developed this social enterprise to provide employment opportunities for people who need the work. And so we do it. We employ 140,000 people in our stores and in business services. We support 1.5 million people actually in dedicated career centers with training and job placement services and other supports. And then we provide online training to about 24 million people, a year. And I think what's so important to understand, and it's not just when we're talking about supporting people who are coming back to their communities like we are today. It's any number of people who faced challenges in life. Is that there is enormous potential in every individual. Some of us come to life with an ability to mine that potential right away based on where we're born, based on the opportunities we've had, based on the mentors we've had, based on any number of other things. Other people, in many cases, face tremendous barriers throughout life that make it much more difficult. In many cases, it can lead to any number of challenges. And so often the people we're talking about today are people who've seen much more significant challenges through life that have compounded frequently because of what they were born into and the course that was in front of them rather than something else. And what I loved about Genevieve's comment is the fact that you all looked at who were the great performers. And what you saw was attitude and commitment and desire. And there is so much just raw talent and raw intent to succeed when people have the opportunity to do that. And what I often tell employers is you need to understand that your next great hire may be somebody that you never thought of before. They may not have the kind of degree that you have on your job description, which actually might not be relevant to what you need. They may not have a conventional background, but there is a great opportunity here to hire terrific people, and in doing so, change somebody's life, change the life of their community, and actually contribute to society in a great way. And there's so much in there, and I think we need to have the confidence to believe that, or we're not really going to invest in it adequately.
So literally thousands of employees and millions of people touched. That's really impressive. And, I think all of us on this call in some way are evangelists for the understanding that we all seem to have, which is there's more inherent potential than perhaps people understand. At the same time, all of us have worked with people who face very real challenges. There could be someone who's joining us today that says, they're making this seem really, really easy, but in fact, it could be really, really hard. And I know in my work, which we do here at the university, we certainly have learned a lot about some certain challenges that we didn't appreciate. I would love to hear, we could start with you, Genevieve, about what types of, if I'm someone listening right now and I want to do what Steve is encouraging us, what must I try to understand about these populations that I might not have understood before?
Excellent question. I think the first thing I'd say is I've noticed people try to overcomplicate things. So don't make it harder than it needs to be. There are certainly challenges. There's things to know and learn about, and that will happen as you take steps forward. But don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. With that being said, I think one of the critical things to understand is that people that are directly impacted by the legal system, they don't enter because of a very black and white or binary reason. People that have committed a crime or have been attached to a crime or have had to plead whether they were actually involved or not, there's a lot of gray area. So understanding context, being able to get to know the person when it's appropriate in the hiring practice and understand who they are now is critical. When we think about the hiring process, we need to check our own personal perceptions before we are checking our professional practices and policies. If we as individuals aren't prepared to think about people differently or with a new set of eyes, with new information, we'll probably be the failure point of the program. Not the job candidate, not even your employment policy. It'll be the individuals doing the interview and assessing that have kind of created their own mental barriers and aren't open to taking these steps forward. So it's important that you are understanding, why are you committed to this work? Are you clearly communicating that within your organization and providing the kind of psychological safety for people to explore this and ask the tough questions and show them that you've thought about it and you have a path forward. But simultaneously, it's important you're creating a safe space for these job candidates to enter into. You can't just throw them in and expect that they're going to solve all of your employment problems. They're an individual like the rest of your workforce. So really critical to first check our personal perceptions and biases and then start aiming to fix our professional practices and policies.
Oh my, this is music to my ears. In the following way, we've been teaching, having MBA students go into prisons here in Virginia and MBA students in New York. And these are currently incarcerated people. And in so many ways, what you just said is so powerful, because we believe that the change that's occurring with our MBAs is as important as what they're teaching to the people that are currently incarcerated. We believe that they will be more knowledgeable about the challenges of people who are returning citizens, and as a result, will be better leaders. So I so enjoy and resonate with that comment. Steve, I want to ask you, building on Genevieve, so she's pointing out that there's an understanding of the holistic person. And in what ways is Goodwill an organization that creates, networks or career ladders or safety nets that recognize that more fulsome person?
Yeah, well, I think that is the issue. We need to understand, and I think our society needs to understand the full picture of what it can take to help a person move forward. And we need to believe that there's tremendous value in making that investment. And I think part of that's respecting the individual who's coming forward to ask for that support. Their challenges are often complicated. They're often deeply rooted. And the systems of support for people in our country right now are often very fragmented. They fall short of the need. So, we do programmatic support as well as hiring in our social enterprise, but our reentry programs, I think, are successful because they provide that full continuum of support, holistic personal support, which might be housing or food or counseling, along with strong coaching, education, training, earn and learn capabilities, and very important, connections with committed employers. All of that fits together. And the other thing, I'm getting into a little bit of a more provocative space here, but I just want to say, when we talk about this often gets to the issue of dollars and cents. These programs are expensive, but they're not expensive when compared with the alternative, which might mean the cost of reincarceration, lost wages to families and the resulting need for support, lost taxes on payroll. And beyond that, we're talking about human lives, and we're talking about families and communities and entire society. So we need to go into these conversations understanding what the need is, but also the deep value in addressing these opportunities powerfully. And then when you think about that latter, it is important when people come to us to say, well, look, what do you need today to get your feet on the ground, to build that confidence, to be able to kind of prove yourself and get connected, which is super important. And then what do you need in the future to help you move along? And we very much think about the longer term career laddering issue, but we want to make sure that people can get anchored quickly and begin to get that base of stability at the same time that they can get the support they need to move to their longer term aspirations. And that process can be can take place over a long time. What we have found is frequently when somebody gets that confidence and understands the value of investing in themselves to move forward, frequently they just really take off. People want more education. They see more opportunity. They want to move up. They're hungry. It's sort of like the possibilities open up. People see those possibilities, and then they move to capture them.
I will tell you with the work we've continued to do, what we understand from the folks who run our facilities is that once people begin some of the programs, that they note, first of all, a change in hope, which is part of what you're talking about, Steve. But also they'll tell you that engaged education programs of people who, let's just say, might have been overlooked, changes even the number of infractions they engage in, and it involves in other positive spillovers. And so what you're recognizing is that holistic investment at point A plays out in other aspects of their life. I so enjoy this. Heather, obviously, you're up next. And, I'm going to, since Steve decided to get provocative, although I love his provocation, I want to talk about the question of something we call the conversation in our work. And I don't know if you can follow what this might be, but the conversation about what my mistake may have been, why I made it, and talking with employers about it. How do you at the bank think about what we call the conversation?
It's a great question, Greg. And, one of the things that our HR professionals really wanted to understand as we undertook this work is, how do you have some of those conversations? How do you have people understand for our industry, sort of what's in or out and what the process is that you must go through to navigate that? It's hard and it's very specific to a person's background and to the regulations that we have to abide by. And I also will just note here that while we think it's appropriate for the largest bank in America to be regulated, we also have urged Congress to make some changes to those regulations, which we think are common sense and would really enable us to work with folks we think are the best people for the job, but haven't been able to get through this gauntlet. So just to go back to the question for a moment, the reason we wanted to go into communities and partner with community organizations is so that we could navigate that process together and not necessarily have a different door or hiring pool, but that we were sourcing candidates who could understand what they may or may not qualify for, what paperwork they would need, and would have partners that could walk through that conversation with them. We work with Cabrini Legal in Chicago. We work with several others there we are learning from one another in this process. We are learning what the obstacles are, how we can streamline a process. We're learning how to have the conversation better. And we have someone in that particular program in Chicago on our team who is constantly in touch with these potential candidates, checking in to say, have you been able to get that piece of paperwork? It's sometimes very expensive to run down all of these files that you need to apply. And it's good to have a partner and help work through that. So one part of your question is about once you're hired and you have to have that conversation, or maybe you don't. And that's a whole different thing to understand, what is your obligation to disclose or not? We're really focused on how do we make sure we don't find ourselves in the situation we believe we've been in, where too many people are not even approaching us because they don't think they can get a job. They've had so many doors slammed in their faces. Why would JP Morgan Chase be a logical place for them to work? We need to understand what we can do differently to change that. And these community partners that we have, which we fund to do this work, they're critical in helping us navigate that. And our theory of the case here is we start in one community, where we've started in Chicago. We tailor it to the job hiring that we'll do in other communities, and we replicate it so that eventually we can take this model to scale, but we've learned along the way and we can share that information. And I would just say that, I thought Genevieve's comments about, how you approach this were really key. And they're also very specific. There's some very general principles, and then there's some very specific things that are applicable in different sectors or in different types of jobs. And so it really takes that kind of a commitment. But once you get into it, you learn so much, and I think the doors really open wide. So that's the approach that we've taken on that, Greg.
So I'm sure Genevieve and Steve are ready to lean in, because I encourage all of us to look at what each of these organizations is doing. Some organizations never ask, some do. And so there are variances around this particular practice. Being regulated might be a part of it. But I've got a question coming in over the transom. So there are people out there watching, and they've sent in a question. And so while we could delve further into this one, I'd like to throw something else. The audience member is asking about subpopulations and is politely pointing out that we're probably talking monolithically about returning citizens. So might there be people with special needs that we might need to focus on in certain ways? I mean, I'll just add a personal anecdote. We began our work in a men's facility, and we were dealing with that 90% of the population that's returning citizens that are men. Then we shifted after the first year to a women's facility. And I learned that estimated 2/3 of women who are currently incarcerated were past victims of domestic violence, something I'm sure all of us know. And so we had to learn how to manage around the question of people who'd been victims. And so that's my example of how we had to shift. But perhaps, and this is an open one for any one of you could say a little bit about a population that you've learned some need for customization.
Well, I think that is go ahead, Steve.
You go, please, Genevieve, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say, that is a very large question, and I know we only have a couple moments left. I think the important thing to think about is, just like the rest of the population of America, we all have a ton of nuances and needs and differences. To your point, Greg, about women, they are the fastest growing incarcerated population in the country. Over 80% of them are mothers. And so when we think about reentry, and again, I want to be careful to the viewer's point about approaching this from a monolithic perspective, we also need to be thinking about the over 70 million people in our country with convictions, or with records, that are not recently returning. They've been out in the community for 5, 10, 15, 25 years, but this conviction, this record is still holding them back. And so when we think about the elderly that are incarcerated, the wrongfully incarcerated, when we think about youth, all of these different kind of groupings, if you will, have different needs. And so if we're thinking about it from a second chance employment perspective, I think it would be very helpful to think about what's going to be the best fit in your company so you can just get started. You need to get low-hanging fruit, get a win in your organization, and I promise you will want to keep doing it again. Mm-hmm. But you need to be thoughtful, you need to be intentional, and you need to be really clear about why you are doing this, and then it will be incredibly fruitful for you moving forward.
So we're going to do a really quick last question, because we only have about a minute and a half, and here it comes. The title of this session is called Business Solves, but all of you, and I encourage you to read about these folks. All of you have had and spent time working with government or working in government. If each of you could give advice to a czar to solve this problem from the government side, and just try to be brief, but something that you would want the government czar on reentry to know. And we'll start with you, Steve.
I would really actually, in doing that, I would actually leverage the question that you just asked, because understanding and respecting the fact that everybody who comes to us is a unique person with a unique set of needs. And, you may find people that have, people coming out of incarceration have higher rates of mental health issues, physical disabilities, any number of issues that are part of the support people need to be able to move forward. And that's why our programs very specifically assess people where they are, the supports they need to move forward. And so understanding that need, the other thing I would say is, we talked about, women who are incarcerated having significantly higher levels of abuse. I think what so many people have gone through in their lives is comparable to abuse. And the repercussions are comparable to abuse in any number of other ways as well, but not exactly the same. And when we think about what somebody needs, with the support they need to be able to move forward with their lives, we have to think about that whole person and also believe that the value is there on so many different levels.
All right, same question. Heather, what do you think? Talk to the czar.
I would say to the czar, there are a whole host of laws and regulations that were created, whether with intention or without, but based in our systemic racism as a country. And that if we don't address those and change these policies to lower these barriers to employment, we will keep trapping people in cycles of poverty. And that it really is holding back not just the opportunity for those individuals, but for our country to grow and prosper.
Marvelous. Genevieve?
Okay, so those 2 points are exceptional. Mine's more technical. Across government agencies, technical platforms do not speak to one another. So having accurate data that can be crunched at a regular time is next to impossible because all the agencies are different and every state and county and jurisdiction is different. So finding a way to collectively bring data points together will help all of us tell more powerful stories, have a better understanding of what actually is evidence-based and works, and be able to actually build goals and accountability structures so we can have a better, more thriving country.
And that would lead to better ladders. All right, I'm going to say one more thing, and that would be a recognition that at the decision we made years ago to pull education out of prisons, let's do our best to put education back into prisons and take the notion that corrections really does mean correcting people, and that one of the best ways to do that is use that time to actually help them sharpen the saw. Listen, I think we're out of time. For those of you who hung on with us, that's evidence to how great these three were. I just want to thank you for your time. They want to hear from you because they're doing good work. I'm doing some good work too, and I want to hear from you, but they're the real ones that are doing that. I want to thank the Chamber for bringing us together because I hadn't met these people, but I had admired them from afar. Thank you all and have a great day.